Sid was an ugly, useless, isolated loser who awakened the Shadow God's forbidden technique to seal humanity's fated extinction, even surviving his own assassination by turning himself into a nuclear weapon. Because ever since he was a child, his only desire was to obtain the infinite powers of the cosmos, and secretly trained to become the coldest super soldier in the world, but hid his powers to appear ordinary. The only person who ever talked to him was Nishino, but he always called her by the wrong name, as he never cared about the identities of background NPC characters. And even though Nishino was a decorated TV star, she lived her entire life in constant fear after losing a tickle fight to a crazy stalker. So when her driver was murdered and never came to pick her up, she decided to walk home for the first time in years, but bumped into an ugly dude in the alley. As he wondered if her name was Nishino Akane, she began running away, realizing she was about to relive her traumatic past. However, a car blocked her path, and the disgusting bastards began trying to put her to sleep. But just as she lost consciousness, the last thing she saw was Sid's ugly face staring at her. By the time she opened her eyes, Nishino realized she was inside a warehouse, but when one of the losers began demanding a special kind of fan service, the traumatic memories flashed through her mind. But Sid was already climbing towards the roof, so just as they noticed him, he broke through the glass using his foot. After blowing his chance to reveal the coolest name of all time, the man drew his gun. But Sid pierced his hand with a glass shard, and as he grabbed him in a bear hug, he threw him down, stomping on his face. His calculated attacks made the other person realize that Sid knew exactly what he was doing, so he put down his gun, revealing that he was an ex-military soldier, and said he'd been searching for a worthy opponent ever since he quit, with Sid having wanted to also fight a Marine. He said he was the perfect opponent, but as John Wick began attacking with a knife, he cut across his arm. When he attacked again, Sid parried with a crowbar, going on the offense and knocking his knife away. However, John decided to attack with his fists, overwhelming him with his blows, and knocking him back with a kick. But as he began to think he had Sid's techniques figured out, Sid told him that he was only getting started, so he flipped the crowbar and smashed John's wrist. Revealing that he had plenty of practice beating down biker gangs, Sid slapped him, but as John recognized his two crowbars, he realized he was the infamous Balaclava Berserker. With panic starting to set in, he lunged for his gun, but Sid knocked off his hand, and repositioning his body, he smashed his knee. As he explained the secret behind his weapons, Sid broke his back and continued smashing him until he passed out. With both men beaten up, Sid began advancing towards Nishino, picking up the knife.
What did he say?
However, when she looked back, she realized he was gone and found the men tied up. But Sid was disappointed that he'd never be as strong as he wanted. So the following day, when they ran into each other again, he called her Nishino without mistaking her for someone else. But while she was looking into his eyes, she realized he was looking back at her for the first time. At that moment, she sensed that he was hiding his pain, the same way she had all this time. But after that incident, Sid's desperation for power only grew stronger, and as he began losing his mind, he Supermaned into Truck-kun, ending his life at that instant. His life goal was to one day become as powerful as a superhero, and so he obsessively learned all of the world's martial arts, until he was able to defeat anyone who stood in his way. But if a group of armed soldiers faced off against him, his only chance of defeating them was if he was the strongest martial artist in the world.
空から核ミサイルが落ちてきたら蒸発するしかない。それが人間だ。
At that instant, he reincarnated into another world, and this time, he was able to sense the magical energy in the air. And even though his new family was much uglier than his previous one, Sid only cared about harnessing the overwhelming essence in the atmosphere. And although he could pierce through solid rock, his family only cared about his sister, who was destined to inherit everything. Hidden in the shadow of her talent, Sid grew up as the average Dark Knight background character, but under that exterior, he was a menace who terrorized bandits. With his enchanted slime suit, he easily dodged a bullet, exterminating the enemy. and unleashing slime swords, he killed the rest of them at the same time. However, when the last one tried sneaking up on him, Sid parried his attack, wondering if he could survive for 2 minutes. But as he jabbed his blade, revealing that he was a Bushinryu master, he slashed through his bodysuit. However, Sid was only pretending to be injured and ended him at that instant. So when he found their treasure, he thought he was now able to buy a Bugatti, but when a sound drew him towards a cage, he saw a disgusting blob inside. Noticing it was starting to rot, Sid thought it was possessed, but when he sensed a magical overload emanating from it, he realized it would be perfect for his experiments. So after taking it home, the menace began shooting it up with magic, but after a few months, he managed to contain the magical overload.
His first thought was to invite his hot new friend to play his favorite game and the sponsor of today's video, Crystal of Atlan, the greatest magicpunk MMO action RPG game ever made. Set in a breathtaking universe, Crystal of Atlan welcomes you into a realm full of towering airships, mysterious ruins, and spellbound cities floating in the sky, making you embark on an epic journey through a fantastical world where magic and futuristic technology intertwine. Because with fast-paced combat and co-op exploration, you can venture solo or join the 4-player raid to experience thrilling adventures as a member of Thornbird Adventurers Guild, battling the leader of dark matter thieves, and uncovering hidden secrets. With over 12 character classes to choose from, you'll have access to 20 skill combinations, along with a fluid combat system that offers seamless control over character movement. On top of that, you can unleash chaos as Maestrix, the newest musketeer subclass, mastering magitech with shotguns, sniper rifles, and floating cannons. Switch between weapons to unleash devastating attacks, and unlock Maestrix with a soul stone that will make you experience high-speed mobility and powerful long-range attacks. Even from the start, you'll be given a choice between 5 distinct classes. From the deadly Scythe Guard to the graceful Cloud Strider, the powerful Magician, the tech-savvy Starbreaker, and the hard-hitting Fighter, with each one of them offering a completely unique combat experience. From manual dodging to time-based counters, rolling away from a boss's massive sword swing, activating a time-slowing spell mid-air, and landing a critical blow just before the enemy powers up. And in the special One Punch Man collaboration event, you'll receive exclusive rewards for free, including Saitama Transformation Badge, Collab Avatar Frame, and many more. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in my description to download the coolest RPG game ever made and join me in this epic adventure. Because while we'll be dominating this new realm of non-stop action, Sid will remain an ugly, disgusting, isolated loser who lived his entire life as a hopeless waste of space.
Damn!
With the elf being the hottest girl he had ever seen, Sid took a dramatic pose for his first reveal as the Eminence in Shadow. So when the girl began wondering how she got her body back, he told her that he broke her curse, as he explained that a curse was cast on her and the rest of the hero's descendants, labeling them as possessed. But when he couldn't come up with a name, he noticed the words on a bottle and told her that the group was called the Cult of Diablos, a group of zealots plotting to revive the great demon. His mission was to remain in the shadows while going against their evil schemes, so activating his magic, he told her that his name was Shadow. Pledging her life to him, she promised to annihilate all their enemies, but even though Sid had made the whole thing up, he extended part of his slime suit to cover her. However, just as he was about to leave, he told her that their group would be called Shadow Garden, and named her Alpha. As the years passed, Sid sparred with his sister in sword training, but realized that the fencing styles in this world were useless, as he could easily defeat her 1,000 times, but allowed her to knock him into the river. Even though it was exhausting playing the part of a background character, Sid knew the perfect chance to show off would come. Because in this world, every noble was enrolled at the Midgar Academy for Dark Knights once they turned 15. But with Claire having just hit that milestone, her disgusting parents realized she was missing on the day of her departure. When her bald-ass father wondered how she got abducted, her bitch mother beat him up for being useless. But with Sid's harem having grown, Beta told him that Alpha was searching for his sister. She thought the kidnappers belonged to the cult of Diablos, and explained that they abducted Claire because they believed she was one of the hero's descendants. However, when she told him that they couldn't determine the location of their hideout, Sid randomly threw a knife at the map. But as Beta thought he just pinpointed the hideout, she wished he would pinpoint her hideout.
What do you mean by that?
All the while, Claire was trapped inside an underground cell. But as she dodged the man's kick, he told her that he'd heard about her brother, and said he wanted to learn more about him. Those words caused her to snap, and she broke out of the chain, threatening to kill him for talking about her brother. But he shut her up with a punch. At that moment, a man arrived to warn him about intruders. But as his men fired their guns, the girls ended their worthless lives. So when Grease began rushing towards the scene, he found all his men dead. Noticing the hot girls before him, he wondered who they were, so Alpha told him that they were Shadow Garden, and another person revealed that they knew all about the revival of the demon Diablos. Desperate to protect his secret, Grease charged forward, but Alpha parried his attack, matching his aggression with her agility and slashing across his body. When she told him that she intended to extract information about their cult, Grease took out a pill bottle, and devouring one of the pills, he burst with immense mana. Lunging forward, he managed to knock her back, but she called his power-up an ordinary trick. With his desperation growing, Grease stabbed the earth, causing it to erupt. But when the smoke cleared, they realized he had escaped through a hole in the ground. Meanwhile, Sid was lost inside the underground tunnels, but when Grease emerged from his secret exit, he ran into him. Desperate to eliminate him, he burst forward. But Sid met the tip of his sword with his own, as the effect from the collision forced the ground to erupt. Although he had more magical power than Alpha, Sid thought he didn't know how to use it. With his blade narrowly missing his face, Sid told him that his fighting had no finesse, and offered to school him on the correct use of magic. So as he began dodging all of his attacks, he easily parried his blade, piercing his shoulder. And as he continued, slashing across his body, Grease realized he had never been so overwhelmed. However, he wouldn't surrender, and began telling him that the evils of this world were so much deeper than he could tackle. But his words only made Sid excited, and as he activated his blazing eye, he told him that he would dive as deep as he could go. These words deepened Grease's desperation, and he consumed all the pills, bursting with enormous mana. But as he lunged forward, attacking relentlessly, he poured his aggression into every strike. But Sid parried his blade without breaking a sweat, and calling him a disgrace. In his final moments, Grease realized he had disappointed his daughter as he watched his locket fall off, but the menace claimed it as his prize. By the following day, Claire managed to make it home, but left for the royal capital right after she was healed. And although Sid wished he could visit the capital, his harem of hot chicks had grown tired of waiting. So Alpha told him that they were leaving him, and said this was goodbye. A few months later, while traveling to the capital, Sid remembered how his ugly face got dumped by his harem, who had told him that they wanted to hunt down the cult of Diablos separately. When he arrived at the capital, he enrolled at the greatest magical academy in the world, and although he was forced to stay in a cheap downtown apartment, he thought it was the perfect place for a background character to live. So as he met his two worthless friends...
Wait till you see the... No. Look at the top of his head. Look at his lips.
As they left for school, they soon began rushing towards the train as it was about to leave, and as they managed to make it inside, they were all crammed with the other lowborn students. Just then, Skell reminded them that the person with the lowest entrance exam scores would be forced to confess to the hottest girl in the school, and suffer her brutal rejection. But with Sid having had the worst score, he thought he would get the perfect kind of experience that would make him a background character. When they arrived at school that day,
麗しのアレクシア王女、学園の女神よ、どうかこの私と清く正しい交際を。
興味ないわ。
After watching the loser get clapped, Sid realized that he would soon share the same humiliation. But as Skell told him not to get cold feet, Sid told them that he already spent all night figuring out how he would confess his love. By the following day, the entire school had heard the news, and as all the students stared at Sid, wondering how a loser like him managed to bag the hottest girl, Sid told his friends that it was definitely weird. As they agreed that it was, Skell began telling Sid that he was too useless to ever have a chance with Alexia. But as Poe agreed, saying that even he was less uglier, he thought he would have had a better chance than Sid. Just then, they noticed Alexia standing at their table, and as she decided to take a seat next to them with her VIP lunch, Sid began shoving all of her meat into his mouth. He wanted her to realize just how much of a lowlife he was, and to dump his ass without a second thought. However, Alexia decided to invite him to her Royal Bush and Fencing class, saying that she had already made a request for him to be accepted into Section 1. Which belonged to the Highborns. That same day, after Sid introduced himself in the fencing class, the instructor named Zenon welcomed him as their newest student, but wondered how much strength he had. So as they began sparring, Sid and Alexia carefully evaded each other's attacks, but as they strike swords, Sid realized that her movements were slow, and that she couldn't use much magic. He thought her skills were bland and boring, and having discovered that she was always compared to her far superior sister Iris, he thought that Alexia must have improved herself through constant training. So as they jabbed at the same time, the bell rang to signal the end of class, but Alexia told him that she hated his fencing style, and admitted that it reminded her of her own. Before long, Sid noticed her with the instructor, who asked her if this little moron was her new boyfriend, and reminded her that she would still be getting married to him regardless of what she did. However, Sid wanted nothing to do with this side quest, and hoped he could get away from her before he became a protagonist. Later that day, as the sun was setting, Sid revealed that he knew she was using him to stop Zenon from marrying her. And as she confessed he was right, she told him that he wasn't any better, as she had forced his friends to reveal that his confession was just a dare. However, she would only end their pretend relationship when Zenon gave up on pursuing her. But as Sid told her that even a blind man could easily tell that they were leagues apart, Alexia tossed a gold coin to shut his useless mouth. With Sid ready to simp for some cash, he caught another, realizing he couldn't lose this opportunity to fund his eminence in the shadow operations.
Not gonna lie, that shit made me hard. I'm not gonna lie, I just got it, bro. I'm not gonna lie.
So as the weeks passed, they continued their pretend relationship, and Alexia would even hold his arm while they walked through the school hallway. But one evening, while sitting on the street steps, Sid began wondering why she wouldn't marry Zenon, as he thought he was the best man to become her husband. But Alexia told him that she hated his existence. She thought he was pretending to be a gentleman, and shoved her cream into Sid's mouth. She always wanted a man who had flaws, so as she told Sid that she had chosen him as her lapdog because his entire face was covered with flaws.
Damn!
She thought that Zenon was hiding something. A few weeks later, while they were riding home on a train, Alexia began telling Sid that his fencing style was a mystery to her, as she had noticed that he only knew the basic skills, but was still completely useless at the sport. However, Sid had realized that she was sloppy during training, and wondered what she was worried about. But as Alexia began telling him that she had always wanted to be as strong as her sister, she said she had to train on her own because everyone thought her fencing style was ordinary. That had always made her hate her style. But when Sid told her that he liked it, Alexia pointed her sword in his face, wondering if he was trying to make a joke out of her. But as the train halted, and she began to leave, Sid knew it was the end of their pretend relationship. The following day, while Sid and his friends were heading to school, the losers began wondering if he managed to score with Alexia, but as he confessed that he never even got a kiss, Skell told him that he would die a hopeless virgin just like them. At that moment, Sid spotted Zenon and two knights, but as they surrounded them, Zenon began saying that Alexia never returned to her dorm last night. As he explained that the Night Order were investigating it as a potential kidnapping, he told Sid that he was the primary suspect for being the last person in contact with her. As he decided to invite Sid for questioning, Sid realized that the knights were ready to draw their swords, so as he noticed more of them inside the school, he decided to surrender, knowing he was in big trouble. Meanwhile, Alexia had woken up chained inside a cell, and as she realized that the chains were sealing her magic, she wondered if Sid had abducted her, but soon noticed a disgusting monster on the side. As an ugly creep entered her cell, saying that he wanted her royal blood, he began extracting it into a syringe. When Alexia wondered what he needed her blood for, Professor Freaky Stein told her that her blood was demon blood, and said he wanted to resurrect the demon into the modern era. All the while, Sid was being tortured in the Night Order department, and as one of the knights said he must have definitely abducted Alexia, he hit him with a baton. However, Sid thought the torture was the perfect way to practice his background character persona, and began screaming as they pierced him with needles, hoping he could win an Oscar for his performance. Inside the underground, Bozo was still extracting Alexia's blood, but as the memories of his damaged lab made him lose his shit, he broke the syringe in his frenzy. As he continued to lose his mind, he began stomping on the defective monster, but when he realized that he could create new monsters with Alexia's blood, he decided to feed her rotten food to raise her blood level. The following day at the Night Order department, Zenon met Iris in her office, and as he began blaming himself for not protecting Alexia, Iris told him that her only priority was to save her sister. She had learned that Sid was arrested as the prime suspect, but when Zenon told her that Sid was too weak to overpower Alexia on his own, Iris suggested they merely keep an eye on him after he was released. As she looked outside her window, she spotted Claire trying to force her way inside to save her brother, but with her friends desperately holding her back, another highborn from the school commanded her to return to her dorm, eventually subduing her into an arm bar. Inside the underground chamber, Alexia had grown completely exhausted and had gotten sick from the rotten food. But that night, Sid was kicked out into the street with his belongings, and one of the knights told him to get lost. As he rode quietly inside the train, he noticed two men spying on him, so as he exited and began walking down the street, the men followed him. Just then, a girl whispered to him as she passed, but when Sid arrived at his dorm, he saw Alpha waiting inside. She was the same girl he saw, but when Sid wondered why she came back, she told him that she had learned he was in trouble. Lord have mercy.
We must stay focused, brothers. We must stay focused.
She revealed that the others were making progress investigating the cult of Diablos, and that their organization had been growing ever since they abandoned his worthless ass, unlike the millimeter Peter he was hiding. As she began getting on top of him, she went on to explain that he would continue to be a suspect, and began undressing him, telling him that the Knight's Order could not be trusted, and got on her knees. As she revealed that Alexia was abducted by the cult of Diablos because of her royal blood, she wondered why he got hooked with her in the first place. However, she was willing to rescue Alexia, but told Sid that he would repay her for the favor. As she was about to leave, she told him that Delta had also shown up to support him, and said she had been missing him. A few hours later, Sid used all the money Alexia gave him to create his own Batcave, excited to retake his place and appear as a supervillain. This motherfucker has dedication. So as Beta flew inside with her beach balls, she saw Sid as the Shadow God, and as she was happy to see him again, she told him that Alpha had gathered every available member of their group at the capital. She explained that their plan was to launch simultaneous attacks on all the Fenrir sect hideouts of the cult, and said they would search for traces of Alexia's magic at the same time. However, Sid wanted a piece of the action, and said he would take Delta's place in their plans, as he was excited to show off his powers. That same night, while two knights were in an alley, they noticed Sid stepping out of his apartment, but as they hurled Alexia's shoe at him, one shit-stain began saying that it was their newest evidence to prove that he abducted her. However, Sid already had enough of their bullshit, but as they began advancing towards him, wanting to arrest him for the second time, they realized that the two spies had been killed. Immediately, Sid slashed the first knight before slicing the second's arm. So as he took on his disguise, killing the second man, he noticed smoke rising in the distance, and thought that Delta must be responsible for it. With the entire city under attack, a knight began reporting the chaos to Iris, but when she told him that she would head for the front lines, she began wondering what was happening. At the same time, the underground was starting to tremble, but as Bozo entered the cell, saying that they were under attack, he decided to inject the monster with the prototype he had developed. At that moment, the creature burst with immense magical energy and Isekai'd his worthless face. But as Alexia began thinking she was next, it sliced the cage, shattering her chains to pieces as Alexia managed to escape from the rubble. Eventually, the monster emerged outside, but as Alexia tried making her way down the tunnel, she saw Zenon before her. He told her that this was his facility and revealed that he funded all of Bozo's research. But as he went on to admit that he still needed her blood, he told her that it would guarantee him the 12th seat in the rounds, a prestigious position in the Night Order. As he blocked her sudden attack, Alexia continued striking his blade, but as she released a burst of magic, slicing across his arm, Zenon realized that she stole Iris's technique. Wanting to show her a technique of his own, Zenon pointed his sword straight across her face, but at the slightest instant, he had sent her sword falling into the water before punching her away. As he told her that he was taking her to another lab, Sid began walking from the end of the tunnel, and as they noticed him, he introduced himself as Shadow. However, Zenon had already heard about him and had learned that he was hunting members of the Diablo's cult, but as he told him that he had not killed any core members, he called him a coward. As he continued by saying that he was a core member of the cult, he vowed to eliminate Sid, but as he steadied his balance and jabbed his sword at him, he realized that Sid was nowhere in sight. With Sid having materialized behind him completely unscathed, he began wondering why a core member of the cult was weaker than water. Meanwhile, the monster was attacking the city, but as it emerged from an alley, a group of soldiers began shooting it. With a single strike, the creature ripped the ground before them, but as 3 knights popped up from behind, they attacked at the same time. However, its wound healed up at that instant, and as it nearly Isekai'd them, they managed to withdraw to a safe distance. Just then, Iris leaped from a rooftop and slashed the monster's body, but as she began commanding her men to retreat, it regenerated before her eyes. When the creature tried fighting back, Iris unleashed her magic into her sword and sliced its arm in a clean strike before blasting it into a building. Even so, the monster regenerated once again. But as Iris was ready to cut it into pieces this time, she unleashed immense energy in her sword, and as she sliced its body, she began slashing it with 1,000 strikes. However, as she readied her sword to eliminate it, Alpha appeared before her eyes, saying that she was only making the creature suffer. But as it tried squashing her, Iris realized she had vanished, so as Alpha began descending from the sky, she summoned a giant sword that burst with immense magical energy. As she unleashed it on the monster, devouring its entire body, a massive energy consumed everything in its radius, until a girl materialized in the blast. As she fell on her face, Alpha knew she was dead, but as she noticed her locket and spotted Grease's face inside the portrait, she realized she was his daughter. However, when she was about to leave, Iris tried telling her to stop, but Alpha revealed that they were the Shadow Garden and warned her to stay out of their way. Inside the tunnel, Zenon was going on the offense, but as he unleashed his magical energy, he managed to exert enough force that pushed Sid a few yards back. As he attacked again, trying to gain the upper hand, he increased his magical energy to overpower Sid. But as he easily quelled it, he knocked him into the water. Disappointed at his attempts, Sid pointed his sword at his face, wondering how he managed to lose his spine. But as Zenon began attacking with relentless strikes, the backlash of the wind from each clash began ravaging the tunnel. The sight of Sid's effortless defending made Alexia stare in awe, and as she noticed his fencing was ordinary, she realized that it was the same style she had wanted to develop for herself, but Sid slashed across Zenon's body. With Zenon already close to defeat, he began wondering why Sid was hiding his identity, even though he had immense powers. But Sid revealed that his only desire was to lurk in the shadows. Deciding to use his trump card, Zenon revealed a pill bottle and said that the pills could awaken a new nature beyond human limitations. Without a second thought, he consumed them, and a massive magical energy erupted from his body, turning him into Brock. As Zenon began saying that he was the third awakened, he cast a slash that ravaged the ground, and revealed that only a few people could control the immense power of the pill. Ready to fight again, he released a burst of magical energy, drawing it into his sword, but as he burst forward, wrecking the ground around him, the energy hit the roof of the tunnel. Inside the energy beam, Alexia realized that Sid was unscathed, but when he parried Zenon's sword and went on the offense, Sid began punching his empty head. Before he could fight back, Sid kicked him to the ground, saying that there was no road to becoming an almighty for the losers who used borrowed strength. With a single stamp, Sid cast a magical barrier that sealed them within the tunnel.
かつて核に挑んだ男がいた。だがそれでも届かぬ高みがあった。だから修行を重ねた果て、一つ答えにたどり着いた。自分が核になればいい。I am atomic.
As the light began fading away, leaving a large hole in the ground, Alexia saw the massive destruction before her eyes. Just then, Iris rushed towards her, happy to see her alive, but as she wondered if her arms were cold, Alexia decided to hug her back. The following day at school, Alexia began telling Sid that his case had been resolved, but when he was about to leave, she decided to thank him for complimenting her fencing style, and said she was finally learning to like it herself. His words had made her accept who she was, but as she confessed that she liked him, she asked if they could have a real relationship.
お断りだ。
Congratulations, you played yourself.
A few days later, while all the members of the Shadow Garden were in a meeting, Alpha revealed that a mysterious group were starting to use their name to launch random attacks, and the girls agreed that they must find the imposters. At the same time, Iris told her two assistants that Zenon was a member of the Diablos cult, and seeing as he was their kingdom's most renowned sword instructor, she said she couldn't trust the men in the Night Order. So as she revealed a mysterious object that served as a clue to finding the cult of Diablos, she began wondering how they could decipher its function. At the academy, a worthless clumsy girl was reading ancient texts, but as she bumped into Sid, who was bathed in body paint from Alexia's brutal payback, he extended his hand to pull her up, but didn't realize that a new relationship was about to develop. Later at the cafeteria, Skell and Poe began wondering if he managed to kiss Alexia. But as Sid told them that they were broken up already, Skell thought he was hopeless. Wanting to turn their useless luck around, he began suggesting they buy chocolate for the girl they liked. And as the excitement nearly made the losers soil their underwear, Sid agreed to follow them. Meanwhile, in the assistant principal's office, Iris showed the clumsy girl named Sherry the mysterious item, saying that her knights had confiscated it from a facility belonging to an organization. However, they had no idea what it was, but with Sherry recognized as the most brilliant researcher in the entire kingdom, Iris thought she could decipher it. But with Sherry uncertain, her father Lutheran encouraged her to accept the task, saying that he believed in her abilities. All the while, Skell, Sid, and Poe were waiting in line to enter the store, but with the long queue, they began wondering if they would make it back to their dorm before curfew, and Poe was afraid that they would become victims of a serial killer. As a girl appeared before them, wondering if they were interested in taking a survey, she invited Sid for feedback as a special guest. So as they began walking through the store, Sid realized that it looked the same as the department stores in his previous life, but wondered who managed to put it together. As they made it to the rooftop, Sid noticed the building before him, but as he walked into the palace, a girl welcomed him to her establishment. Her name was Gamma, another member of the Shadow Garden, and as she told Sid that the store belonged to her, she explained that she had decided to recreate it just as he used to describe. Because when they were little, Sid had told them random things from his past life, calling it wisdom of the shadows, but never could have thought in a million years that Gamma would bring those stories to life.
父影一と言ってもいいくらいだけど、運動能力は最悪だ。
After taking his seat on the throne, Sid thought he was finally getting his deserved recognition as the eminence in the shadow, but wondered how Gamma's empty head managed to create everything. As Gamma began saying that she knew exactly why he came, she explained that Alpha and the others were investigating the serial killers who were claiming their name. But when Sid remembered that Poe had mentioned the killer, he thought that Alexia was the out-of-control menace. However, as he began to leave, Gamma introduced the girl as new, saying that she was their newest member, but was offering her as his new toy.
Yeah, boy.
That night, while they were rushing back to their dorm, Skell thought they wouldn't make curfew, but Po blamed Sid for wasting all of their time flirting with Nu. As Sid tried explaining that it was the only way to get their chocolate, he began wondering why his rejection would make Alexia go on a killing spree. Just then, he sensed a clash of swords, and as he knew that the serial killer was close, he decided to give the greatest Oscar-winning performance of all time, and began saying that he needed to take a dump. As his friends realized it was a code brown, they decided to honor their bro code, and vowed to never tell anyone that he took a dump in an alley. So as Sid screamed at them to run away, the brain-dead idiots ran off, but Sid knew that they were the greatest morons he had ever seen. Inside the alley, Alexia was striking blades with the imposter, but as she asked him to surrender, he continued saying that they were the Shadow Garden. With Sid already watching from the rooftop, Alexia managed to parry the man's sword away, but as she raised her own sword to end him, two backups appeared behind her. Without hesitating, they attacked at the same time while another managed to wound her from behind. But she punched his face, so as the rest of them gathered before her, Sid slayed one in an instant. But when they noticed his sword, the survivors escaped onto the rooftops. Desperate to know who he was, Alexia began wondering what he was using his powers for, but Sid told her to stay out of his business. As he went after the imposters, Alexia passed out from blood loss, but when Sid slayed one of the men, Nu appeared on the other rooftop. She was impressed that Sid had managed to find them already, but when she offered to take over for him, the killer lunged towards her, but Nu sliced up his body. Meanwhile, outside the city, a messenger reported that all the puppets had been killed. The following day, while Skell, Sid, and Po were riding on the train, Po wondered if Sid brought their chocolate, so as he told them that he did, Skell was excited that they would win a girl over with their mini-sized chocolates. However, after arriving at school, a few minutes later, Po was ready to make an attempt of his own, having carefully studied everything about his crush, even down to the color of her underwear.
Hey yo, what the f***?
However, as he left, Sid began hearing a girl screaming and calling him a worthless stalker, but he concluded on giving his chocolate to the first girl he came across. At the same time, Sherry settled next to him, but as Sid backtracked and gave her the chocolate, he began walking away without a second glance. Later that day, while Sherry was staring at the box of chocolate, she remembered that her father had earlier told her that the gift was a sign of Sid confessing his love for her, and had said that Sid was waiting for an answer. So as Sherry ate out Sid's round shiny balls, she thought he was sweet. A few days later, as Sid arrived at school, he noticed Nu following him closely, so she told him that she borrowed the uniform to attract less attention. While sitting on a bench, Nu began telling him that the imposter she apprehended had been brainwashed, and revealed that it was a shared trait of the cult of Diablo's vanguard, and their name was the Third Children. However, Sid was only concerned about the Bushin Festival fighting contest, because when he told Skell that he wouldn't enter it, Skell's pathetic face entered him in anyway, saying that hot girls would fall over for him if he won. As Nu continued explaining that the cult had been brainwashing people for years, she said they were trying to lure them out by using their own name. However, they had managed to confirm the presence of a first child in the royal capital named Rex, who had managed to maintain his sense of self, despite being one of the children. Nu thought that the cult of Diablos were cooking up a secret plan, but her words only made Sid figure out an idea for quitting the fighting contest, and soon began to leave. The following day, when the contest began, Claire easily defeated her opponent, but as the instructor declared her the winner, Skell and Po realized they had lost all their money to the opening bet. For the second fight, Sid faced off with the student council president. Her name was Rose, the princess of the Oriana Kingdom, and the best swordswoman in the academy. As she aimed her sword at him, Sid concluded that this was the perfect time for him to reveal his 48 master techniques that he honed through long and difficult training. So as the instructor commanded them to start, they burst towards each other, directing their swords at the other. In that instant, Sid consumed a blood sachet, and as he adjusted his foot, he took a direct hit that repelled him. However, his plan for being the perfect pathetic background character worked out exactly as he wanted. But when the instructor tried declaring Rose the winner, he told them that he wasn't quitting. So when Rose noticed the determination in his eyes, she accepted to fight him again, and Sid began advancing towards her. But as they burst forward again, Sid took another nasty hit, but still wouldn't surrender, as he continued taking repeated hits that made Rose start wondering why he was so determined. Admitting he was a formidable opponent, Rose decided to apologize for underestimating him. But as she summoned her magical energy, ready to eliminate him, she lunged with her blade, but the instructor pushed Sid out of her way. Immediately, he declared Rose the winner, but as she admitted that she was defeated in the Battle of Spirits, she watched as Sid was carried off. A few minutes later, while Sid was leaving the arena, he was glad that he looked as pathetic as possible. And as he noticed Sherry behind him, she asked to speak with them. So as they sat at a cafeteria, she told him that she watched his fight. And as she admitted that she liked his 9-inch sword, as she decided to present him a gift, Sid wondered who this flat-ass bitch was, but accepted her gift anyway.
もしよろしければお友達からお願いします。
友達いいよ。
His words made Sherry excited, and began telling Lutheran that she wouldn't die a lonely, ugly virgin. But when Sid discovered that her father was their assistant principal, he realized that he was careless to have gotten involved with them. However, Lutheran could already picture their wedding, and began telling Sid to go easy on his daughter. A few days later, while the students were gathered in class, Rose entered with her assistant, and began explaining the election to fill the vacancy on the student council. At the same time, the masked knight named Gaunt had arrived underground with his men, so as he activated Mirage Eye, a magical barrier extended across the school, covering the entire premise. When Alexia arrived outside, she noticed the gates were closed, but as she checked the security posts, she realized that they were all dead. Inside the school, Sid discovered that he couldn't use his magic, but wondered how no one else had noticed. So as the men rushed up the stairs, Sid sensed their presence as they burst inside, leaving all the students in shock. When one of the men began saying that they were the Shadow Garden, the backlash of the wind from his slash destroyed their swords. So as he revealed that they were taking over the academy, he directed them to stay in their seats, but Rose drew her sword to challenge him. Wanting to make an example out of her, he unleashed his magical energy, but when Rose tried to do the same, the Mirage Eye cancelled her magic. Before she knew it, the man broke her sword in half, but just as he was about to end her life, Sid screamed as he pushed her aside, taking the blade with his own body. As he fell down, the sight left all the students in shock. But as Rose wondered why he had to be the ultimate simp, she remembered their earlier encounter in the arena, and concluded that he must have loved her. However, the man pointed his sword at her, and as he commanded her to follow them, all the students were led into the school auditorium. A few minutes later, while Sid was alone, he managed to pound on his heart to restart it, but as he repeated the process to increase his heartbeat, he eventually sprang up from his final attempt. Having narrowly evaded permanent death, Sid realized he was lucky to have pulled off the 10-minute death heartbreak. By using magic to maintain regular blood flow to his brain while his heart stopped beating. What the f*** can this dude not do? As a pretending background character in his own anime, Sid knew that he could be reckless whenever he wanted, but noticed that his magic was still getting blocked. However, he managed to refine it into a narrow thread, so as he stitched up his wound, he put on his jacket for cover. Meanwhile, Sherry was still examining the artifact, but as a loser burst through her window and landed on her table, she backed away with the item. As the stain introduced himself as Rex, he began saying that his job was to retrieve the artifact. But as he drew his weapons, Glenn blocked his attack. At the same time, Marco clashed with another enemy in the hallway, and as he managed to hold him off, Sherry escaped down the corridor. Outside, Sid was staring down from a rooftop, but as he realized that the students had been held hostage, he read the entire proceedings from the spot. Wanting to stall the dark cloaks until nightfall, he launched a slime arrow that killed one of them, and continued blasting them until he killed everyone outside. All the while, Sherry's flip-flops were making noises as she ran, but as she managed to hide away, her brain dead ass began thinking she was safe, but Sid blasted an enemy to protect her. As she climbed up the stairs, Sid leaped down from the top of the building, strangling another dark cloak as he noticed her. However, Sherry thought it was only her imagination. But as she remembered Rex's pathetic face, she realized that the enemies were using the unique artifact she saw in her text, and figured it was the reason why they wanted her own artifact. Before she knew it, Sid eliminated another enemy, and as he watched her from the entrance, Sherry kicked the step while climbing up, but was lucky enough to fall into his warm arms. As Sid gave her the artifact, She noticed the bloodstains on his clothes, but as he noticed that her useless voice was too loud, he pointed out that her flip-flops were too noisy. After they made it into Lutheran's office, Sherry managed to find the Eye of Avarice in an ancient text, and revealed that it was blocking their magic, as she went on to explain that it could absorb magical energy from people that were within its range. She said it would store them temporarily, but revealed that the dark cloaks had programmed it to remember their magical frequencies. However, Sherry explained that it couldn't absorb powerful spells that exceeded its capacity, and said that it would release all of the energy once it hit its limit. For the Eye of Avarice to efficiently absorb magic, Sherry thought it needed to be planted inside the auditorium, seeing as there was a large quantity of magic from the captured students inside. When Sid wondered how they could fight it, Sherry told him that the artifact was the control unit for the Eye of Avarice, and revealed that she had finally figured out how to work it. As she activated its magic, she explained that the eye was created to be used with the artifact to store magic, but said she needed to activate it to stop the eye from working. However, she had forgotten her tools for fine-tuning it inside her study, but as Sid wanted to be a gentleman, he offered to go in her place. Meanwhile, in the auditorium, Rex was telling Gaunt that their plans were perfectly in place, but when Gaunt wondered why he had not retrieved the artifact, he vowed to Isekai his worthless face if he returned without it. However, as Rex was about to leave, he told him that someone was taking out their thirds and seconds, and thought he was a real master fighter, so as Gaunt concluded that they were members of the Shadow Garden, he said he wouldn't lose to them. A few minutes later, while Rex and his men were walking through the corridor, they vanished in an instant. But as he was wondering what happened, Sid bashed his face with his palm. Desperate to protect himself, Rex activated a technique that covered him with an ultranet. But as he began saying that Sid couldn't touch him, Sid bashed his face from the inside, before kicking him into the library. At that moment, Rex noticed all the dead bodies, and as the sight nearly lost his mind, Sid ended his worthless life. At the same time, Nu had arrived inside the study, but as she realized that Glenn was dead, Sid appeared before she could end Marco. As she told him that the rest of the group had infiltrated the academy, she said they were waiting on his command, but admitted that it would be nearly impossible to launch an attack while their magic was restricted. However, Sid's only goal was to gather all the things that Sherry needed for fine-tuning the artifact, so after he found everything he needed, he explained it all to Nu, and said they would neutralize the Eye of Avarice. Outside the school, one of the knights was telling Iris that all their specialists were being held hostage in the auditorium, but at the same time inside, Nu was signaling to the rest of her group on the rooftop. So inside the office, after Sherry had fine-tuned the artifact, she activated a device to pass magical energy inside. So as it awakened with a golden light, Sherry was excited that she would finally shut down the eye. She remembered that Lutheran had described a hidden tunnel that would lead to the auditorium. So as she managed to activate the secret entrance, the door opened before their eyes. Sherry thought that Lutheran was also a hostage, and as she was eager to rescue him, she began climbing down the stairs. Inside the auditorium, Gaunt was wondering why Rex hadn't returned, but Rose was asking a student to be patient, because with their magic already blocked, Rose thought they would be vulnerable to attacks, but then even with it, she thought they were no match for Gaunt's magical energy. When another student tried suggesting they make an attempt anyway, they realized that a boy had been shot. But as the sight made Rose angry, Sherry managed to sneak inside. As she spotted the Eye of Avarice, she activated the artifact and hurled it towards the eye. So as a golden light shined over the auditorium, it disabled its magic and brought down the barrier around the school. While the students were still wondering what happened, Rose kicked one of the enemies to claim his sword, so as she revealed that their magic had returned, she commanded them to fight back. Immediately, the students went on the attack. But as Gaunt directed his dark cloaks to kill them, he began advancing towards the artifact. So as Rose continued her slaughter, she noticed that her magic wasn't fully recovered, but knew that she needed to stop Gaunt before he escaped. As she rushed forward, dark cloaks attacked her again, but as she raised her sword to end him, the enemy severed in half. The ease of the slaughter made her wonder if she truly killed him, but as 3 men attacked her, the glass roof shattered as Sid landed in their midst. At that moment, Rose realized that the entire auditorium was surrounded, so as Sid announced that they were the real Shadow Garden, he directed his sword to signal the girls. At the same time, Gaunt directed his men to fight back, but the girls easily slayed them all. When Rose realized the opportunity, she told the students to escape, but Sid noticed Gaunt as he was leaving. All the while, Sherry was still looking for Lutheran, but as the overheated lamps blew up in flames, The fire soon spread across the auditorium. Before long, it extended to the school building, burning through the corridor, but Gaunt continued turning up the gas. As the entire school went up in flames, Iris realized that all the students had managed to escape, but as Rose explained that a mysterious group appeared to wipe out the Dark Cloaks, she said they both called themselves the Shadow Garden. Meanwhile, Sherry was still inside the tunnel, but as the fires increased, she began running away, wondering where her father was. At the same time, Gaunt was gathering up books in Lutheran's office, but as he set them on fire, Sid appeared on his balcony. He had discovered that Gaunt was Lutheran, but as Lutheran took off his visor and wondered how he managed to figure it out, he said he would kill him to protect his secret. However, Sid wanted to know why he became a villain, and decided to ask why he attacked the school. So as Lutheran began saying that he was once the greatest fighter in the entire kingdom, he revealed that his incurable sickness had brought his glory to an abrupt end. So in his desperate desire to attain that height once again, he had killed Sherry's mother to acquire the key to his healing, which was the Eye of Avarice. On top of that, he went on to adopt Sherry as his daughter, waiting for the day she would decipher the artifact. His desire to gain the artifact had made him attack the school, and he continued by saying that Sherry was only a means to an end. But with Sid having heard enough, he knew it was time to end his life. So as they faced off, Lutheran slayed Sid in an instant, sending him falling out the window. But as he thought it was all over, Sid returned as Shadow, and with Lutheran knowing he would be a tougher opponent, he decided to combine the power of the artifact and the eye. As it released a burst of magical energy, sticking into his body, it overwhelmed him, and transformed his body while curing him of his sickness. The immense magical flow made Lutheran think he was invincible, but as he attacked Sid, he parried his blade, and blocked all of his attacks without taking a single step. Lutheran admitted that he was strong, but as he decided to unleash the full power of the core, he shattered the walls before him, but his juices spurted from Sid's invisible attack. Even so, Lutheran wouldn't surrender, so he began attacking again, revealing that he already made arrangements to make Sid take the blame for everything that happened. However, Sid couldn't care less about his threat, and as he told him that he would only walk down his own path, he said he would continue his mission even if the entire world turned against his group. So as Lutheran charged again, Sid pierced his hand and weakened both of his knees. But as he stabbed into his heart, shattering the core with a twist of his blade, the energy consumed his body. When Sid began to leave, ignoring Sherry on the sight of her dead father made her scream. But as she began to cry, Sid thought she was better off not knowing who the two-faced lying sack of shit really was. A few days later, while Alpha was reading Shadow's wanted poster, she thought he was a true hero who was willing to take up the guilt of the entire world, and said they must continue in his footsteps. But at the academy, the entire place had been completely ravaged. But while Sid was heading home after the close down, he saw Sherry before him. As she thanked him for helping her fine-tune the artifact, she said she was going to study abroad, and revealed that there was something important she needed to do. When Sid wondered what it was, the thought of it nearly broke her heart, but she told him that it was a secret. As she left in her carriage, Sid walked down the other end of the street, but knew that she intended to avenge her father's death. As the days passed, he stayed alone inside his dorm, even after all the students went home for an early summer break. Eventually, he got a letter from Alpha, and as he realized that he needed to settle an old score, he thought it was time to head for the sacred land called Lindworm. However, a few days ago, after the attack on the school, Rose had rushed into the infirmary to find Sid, and after looking past the wounded students, she had found him in bandages. The sight of his living body made her wonder if his little sword would ever rise again. But as she pledged her unwavering love anyway, she told him that she accepted his feelings and was giving him all of her heart. So when Sid was leaving for Lindworm, she tagged along, clinging closer than an ugly parasite. But while she was saying that the hands of destiny had brought them together, Sid knew that he needed to get away from her hands of distraction. As she began wondering if he was heading for Lindworm because of the goddess's trial, a renowned fighting ritual for the greatest knights in the world, Sid told her that he was. But when she began saying that she couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with him, he managed to slip his hand away. Wanting no part in her useless fantasies, Sid decided to check through a pamphlet of Lindworm, a holy site in the city where the goddess was believed to alight upon the earth to grant power to 3 heroes. However, Rose still wouldn't back down and began saying that their love could overcome any obstacle. But Sid knew that he really needed to overcome the obstacle that was her worthless face. When they finally arrived at Lindworm, they went sightseeing in the street. At night, while he was scouting the cathedral from a rooftop, he noticed a man running in the shadows, but as he landed in an alley, Sid parried his sword with a stick. Immediately, 3 stripes of magical light slashed him from the sky, but as Epsilon materialized behind Sid, her weapons of mass distraction were bigger than any nuclear missiles Sid could create. As she began explaining everything that happened, Sid told her that he was proceeding with his own plan. And even though her tits were begging for his touch, he knew she had piled an enormous amount of slime on her body to increase the real size of her flat board. A few days later, as Sid decided to soak inside a hot spring, Alexia noticed him in the water, but the sight of his GigaChad bod made her freeze on the spot. However, as Sid decided to ask why she was in Lindworm, she told him that she was invited as a special guest for the goddess's trial. She explained that the fighting ritual was created to awaken ancient warriors into the sanctuary, so that they could compete against humans. As she went on to reveal that the archbishop at the cathedral had been murdered, she said she was originally supposed to audit him, but knew he had died under mysterious circumstances. When she began wondering why Sid was not trying to look at her body, he told her that he was trying to make her comfortable, but as he sensed her eyes on his body, he asked her to stop glancing over at his Excalibur. Wanting to clap back, Alexia began saying that his Excalibur could be no bigger than a worm.
君がミミズだと思ったが、まだ鞘に入っているだけかもしれないんだから。鞘から抜かれし聖剣は輝く刃を解き放ち、混沌の園へ旅立つだろう。
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
The following day, when the fighting ritual was about to begin, a new acting archbishop named Jack began explaining the history of the tournament. But as Alexia thought his useless face looked suspicious, she remembered that he had cancelled the audit when she met him in the sanctuary. Even though he had known that the royal family sent them to investigate the dead archbishop, he told her that the church couldn't attend to them until the killer was found. Just then, Jack activated a secret button, so as a magic symbol appeared in the arena, casting a barrier around the fighters, it released Rainbow Wall into the sky. But as it dispersed, Jack commanded the goddess's trial to begin. For the first battle, an ugly-ass loser arrived in the arena, but as 2 uglier losers began giving free commentary, Sid discovered that an ancient dead warrior could really be summoned. However, when the loser tried summoning a hero, no one appeared because he was too useless, so another knight took his spot in the arena. At the same time, Sid was considering making a dashing entrance as the Eminence in Shadow, and would dart away after showing off his eminent powers. However, with every other knight having failed to summon a hero, Sid concluded on remaining a background character. But at that moment, he heard his name across the arena, and as he realized that he was being summoned to fight, Rose began saying that Sid was her strong and capable man. However, Sid had no idea how he got listed as a fighter, but knew that he only had 3 options. For his first option, he thought he could accept to fight in the trial, but was worried that a powerful ancient warrior would appear before him, forcing him to reveal his powers. As for his second option, he thought he could run away after quitting, but had no desire to get humiliated again, since the entire arena already knew that he was a Dark Knight. However, for the third option, Sid decided to release a flare into the sky, drawing everyone's attention. But while they were wondering what the light was, they noticed shadow in the arena. Sid's third option was to confuse the entire situation, so as he summoned his dark sword, the immense magical flow from his body awakened his sword's mana, and with a single swing of his blade, the magic circle activated with a rush of magical energy. As an ancient goddess materialized before him, Jack wondered how it was possible, but Beta revealed that she was Aurora, the Witch of Calamity. According to legends, she had once rained chaos and destruction down on the world. But when Beta asked Jack to reveal the entire history for another one of her useless books, her massive cannons compelled the ugly old loser to start spilling everything. However, he thought that Sid would be completely useless against her. But as Alexia told him that he was wrong, she revealed that the goddess's trial must have summoned Aurora as an appropriate opponent, because Shadow's powers must have been on her level. Inside the arena, Sid was excited that he found an opponent who felt the same way that he did, who thought a battle was a conversation. From the shifting of her sword's point, even to the placement of her foot, all of the movements that reflected her will. As she released thick bars of body paint that rained down like spears, Sid whisked his way through them. But as she stayed on the offense, Sid continued weaving through. As Alexia began saying that Aurora was truly strong, and that no ordinary knight could fend off her attacks, she revealed that Sid had not launched any attacks. At the same time, Sid was easily evading all the attacks, and as he glided across the arena, Happy to have found a worthy opponent, Aurora tried to corner him at the center. However, Sid realized that her actual power had been restrained, so as he slashed the web of body paint, he slayed her with a single strike. At that instant, she disintegrated, but as he flew out of the dome, leaving everyone in shock, the dome cracked and shattered into pieces. Just then, a magical energy sprang inside the arena, revealing a magic symbol, so as the ancient seal spread across the city, Alpha realized that the sanctuary had answered Sid's call. Meanwhile, Sid was staring from a rooftop, thinking that everyone was talking about his mysterious eminence. But as the magic symbol appeared before him, he wondered if it was a giant door and teleported to another rooftop. However, the symbol appeared once again, but as he began teleporting, it continued following him, eventually materializing before his eyes. Thinking it was a teleportation portal, Sid began wondering if it was supposed to lead him to Aurora, and decided to enter anyway. At the same time in the arena, all the people were staring at the magic symbol, but while the girls were wondering what it was, Nelson had realized that the sanctuary responded to Sid. When Rose demanded an explanation, he decided to explain that today was the one day of the year where the door of the sanctuary could open, but revealed that it had never done so in the middle of the trial. Having learned a few things about the sanctuary, Alexia began wondering why its door wasn't hidden inside the cathedral. But Nelson told her that the door could change location at will. It could also take on the most appropriate form to respond to those who sought it, even judging their worthiness to pass through. For this reason, it was called a forbidding door, a beckoning door, and a welcoming door. But as the door began to open, Nelson screamed for everyone to evacuate. However, as he tried asking the girls to leave, they realized that the Shadow Garden had arrived. But Alpha warned Rose and Alexia to be on their best behavior until the door closed. As they jumped towards the gate, they were whisked inside. But when Epsilon began saying that they would be taking Nelson with them, the ugly old fart wondered what they intended to do inside. As Epsilon revealed that they wanted to find answers, reinforcements arrived, threatening to eliminate Beta. Just then, Epsilon looked back, having sensed a man's presence at her behind. But as he reappeared before her, slicing her fake tits off, she reattached them to her body before slashing him a dozen times. Before Nelson's eyes, his entire body fell into pieces, but as Epsilon grabbed his worthless face, they whisked into the gate. At the same time, the others followed, but when Alexia realized that the gate was about to close, she flew inside, giving Rose no other choice but to follow her. However, as they fell on top of Beta, Alpha decided to ignore their useless faces, saying that it could be important for them to also learn the truth. After arriving at a vault, Alpha began saying that this was the place where the left arm of Demon Diablos was sealed away according to legend, after he was defeated by the hero Olivier. However, Alpha thought that the only thing buried here was the truth of the dark corners of histories, and as she told them that the hero was actually a girl, she revealed her face, saying that they looked exactly alike. Realizing she was a possessed, Nelson began saying that she should be dead already. But as Alpha revealed that the cult's goal was not only to bring the demon back to life, she managed to awaken the vault with her magic, explaining that a great battle once occurred inside. As the vault opened, a stream of water flowed outside, and as Alpha revealed that the vortex locked away all the memories, she called the place a graveyard of ancient memories and demonic grudges. Meanwhile, Sid had arrived inside a room, but as he found Aurora inside, he began wondering if she summoned him. However, Aurora told him that she didn't, but as she began saying that she enjoyed their fight in the arena, she told him that he was the strongest opponent she ever faced. When she wondered how he got inside, Sid explained that he entered the gate. But as he asked if she knew the way outside, Aurora told him that she had no memories of ever leaving, and couldn't possibly find the exit. Realizing she was useless, Sid was ready to ditch her worthless face, but Aurora asked him to free her from her straitjacket. As he raised his sword, Sid cut her free, so when Aurora suggested they escape together, she explained that the sanctuary was a memory prison created from ancient battles, and that they would be free once they destroyed its magical core. Having no other choice, Sid agreed to work with her, but Aurora told him that their magical powers were restricted inside, so as he watched his flames extinguish, he realized she was telling the truth. However, he was certain that he would find a way out, so as Aurora decided to tag along, the memory shattered as they left. On the other side, Alpha and the others had arrived inside Olivier's memories. So as Alpha began explaining that the cult of Diablos had gathered orphan children for experiments, she said their bodies had rejected the treatments, turning them into ugly monsters that were known as the Possessed. At the same time, Sid and Aurora were walking through another memory, but as they noticed a girl that looked exactly like her, Aurora told him that they needed to destroy this memory so that they could move forward. Having already figured the way out, she smacked her younger self to shatter the memory. Inside Olivia's own memories, Alpha continued explaining that Olivia was the only compatible child to the Diablo's cells, and as she explained that she was given a mission to extract new cells from Diablo's after gaining its power, the memory also shattered. Noticing they were in a battlefield, they watched as the cult used powerful ancient artifacts to immobilize Diablo's left arm for more experiments, eventually using it to create the overpowered pills. However, they had dumped it after realizing that its effects were too strong. But as they entered a new memory, they discovered that Nelson was one of the scientists. During one of their experiments, they had recreated Diablo's blood to grant them tremendous power and a body that would never grow old. So as Nelson admitted that it was called Beads of Diablo's, Alpha began revealing its side effects, and said it needed to be taken once every year even though only 12 beads could be made. Due to its scarcity, the Knights of Rounds were formed to make 12 members, as Alpha went on to reveal that they were trying to perfect the drug by using the blood of the hero's descendants. Nelson affirmed that every member of the cult wanted the power and eternal life in the beads. As he managed to free himself, saying that he was one of the chosen Knights of Rounds, Delta stabbed his heart when he tried to unleash his powers, before dumping his body inside the water. However, they soon noticed the surface burbling, but as Nelson emerged from it, the memory shattered at that instant. Just then, they realized that they had been teleported to a new realm, but as they noticed that they had been separated, Alpha told them that it must be another feature of the Sanctuary's security system. At that moment, Nelson began saying that the Sanctuary was his territory, as he split himself into clones. But with Delta already itching for a battle, she slayed the clones before her and sliced more of them as they attacked. As she noticed her magic was unstable, she blocked Nelson's attack, before leaping all the way back. However, their slime was already losing its magic, so as Nelson revealed that he had intentionally lured them to the center of the Sanctuary so that they would lose their power, he decided to regenerate his clones. Even so, the sight of them only made Delta hungry to keep fighting. Meanwhile, Aurora and Sid were walking through a dimension with no sense of up or down, but as a blinding light teleported them into the battlefield, Aurora decided to pull Sid's lazy ass up. As they walked over the bodies, they soon came across Aurora's younger self, but when she tried to eliminate her, Sid saved her from her own Isekai'd, using a zombie's face as a springboard. At that moment, they realized they were surrounded by zombies, but as Aurora told Sid that the Sanctuary was rejecting them, she said she would be back inside the straitjacket if she got killed here. All the while, Epsilon and the other half of the Shadow Garden were walking through the laboratory, but as a zombie appeared before them, she ran through Epsilon, turning into a ghost in the process before dispersing into thin air. When the girls wondered what just happened, Epsilon told them that the zombie was a memory that reacted to them as possessed. So as she let out those words, the memory shattered, and she told them that they were lucky to have been saved by Sid. As they searched through the library, discovering the secrets of the past, their slime bodysuit began dissolving, so Epsilon told them that they were getting closer to the center of the Sanctuary. Meanwhile, Sid was already destroying the zombies, but as more of them continued to appear, he knew the fight would go on forever without their magic, so as he advanced towards the girl, he cut her down to break the memory. After teleporting into a dome, they noticed an ancient holy sword before them, but Aurora revealed that they were at the center of the Sanctuary. At the same time, Delta had gone into a rampage, but as she smashed the clones even with her exposed tits, Nelson wondered how she was so strong with her limited magic, but Alpha killed the last clone. Even so, Nelson decided to create new clones, saying that this was his full power. But as the menacing bitch began oozing with enormous magical energy, she raised her iron slab, smashing down on them. Back in the center, Aurora told Sid that they were supposed to destroy the magic core on the other side of the door to gain their freedom. But as Sid's useless brain managed to figure that his sword couldn't break the chains, he told her that he couldn't draw the holy sword either. He could feel it inside his body, but as he decided to try anyway, he realized that it could only be drawn by the Chosen One. At the same time, Aurora discovered that only the hero's direct descendants could draw the sword, so as they realized they had no other options, they decided to rest by the sword. In the meantime, Delta was still rampaging, But as the memory eventually broke, Nelson began wondering how she managed to beat his 100 clones. Alpha told him that all his clones were as useless as he was, but as she began backing him into the corner, Nelson noticed Olivia's statue and decided to summon her. Immediately, her seal broke, and as the magical energy released before them, Olivia appeared before their eyes. Just then, Epsilon told Alpha that they had found everything they needed, and that they were ready to create an exit. So as they began to leave, Alpha revealed that their only objective was to cut off the sanctuary's source of power. So as she whisked into the portal, the girls followed in another. With the loser all by himself, he began saying that they could perfect the beads if they managed to extract Alpha's blood, but wondered what excuse he could make up to save his ass. At that moment, the security system warned him that invaders were at the center of the sanctuary, and as he realized that he could make them the perfect scapegoats, he commanded Olivia to follow him. Meanwhile, Sid and Aurora were still waiting by the sword, but as the bald-head stain emerged from the gate, they noticed Olivia behind him. However, Aurora had no memories of them, but as Nelson began saying that they couldn't possibly open the gate, he directed Olivia to eliminate them. At the same time, Sid began advancing towards her, but as Olivia flashed towards him, throwing him into the walls, she spotted him falling down and continued her attacks. Eventually, she hurled him into the water, but as Sid realized his sword was broken, Olivia knocked him down. However, Sid's plan was falling into place, but when Nelson wondered why he was smiling, Olivia attacked him, stabbing into his shoulder. Even so, Sid landed lightly on his feet. But when Nelson wondered why he was still alive, Sid began saying that Olivia wasn't communicating with him, and as he had noticed that she had no heart, he said that their fight was basically pointless. Desperate to end him anyway, Nelson directed Olivia to finish him off, but Aurora rushed to protect him, saying that no human could ever defeat Olivia. She told him that he had given her more memories than she could ever ask for, and said that there was no need for him to die. But as Nelson offered to spare his life in exchange for her services, Sid began saying that he wasn't a charity case, and that he didn't need her help. With Nelson's anger already burning up, he told Olivia to end his life. In that instant, he twisted her arm and held her in a chokehold. As she disintegrated before his eyes, Nelson began wondering how he managed to survive getting stabbed through the gut. But Sid told him that he protected all his vital organs, and went on to explain the entire process. However, Nelson thought he was definitely a nutcase, but as Sid began advancing towards him, wondering if he wanted to be next, Nelson began saying that he was only lucky to have defeated Olivia, and revealed that she was just a copy. As he activated the magic in the sanctuary, thousands of Olivia clones appeared across the dome, and Nelson revealed that this was the full power of the sanctuary. Immediately, the clones attacked Sid at the same time, but as he opened his closed eye to activate his magic, he repelled them with his slime sword, making them disperse. The sight of their annihilation forced Nelson to open his floodgate, so as he commanded all the Oliviers to kill him, Sid began fighting them off, realizing the fight could go on forever. So as he decided to release his full magical powers, Aurora wondered how a human could be so powerful.
Atomic.